All right, this letter came in from Jason Gerhard in White Deer, Pennsylvania Federal Correction Complex, Allenwood. And this young man was caught up in the Ed Brown tax standoff in New Hampshire. Not totally sure, but I don't think he's a Christian. And I sent him a Bible, and we'll just read his letter, and I'll put his address on the screen, and you guys can decide if you want to write him a letter or not. Dear Mr. Davis, okay, it was written on 12/16 of 16. It's now the 24th, so it took 8 days to get here. All right, dear Mr. Davis. Well, it took me 4 days, but I finished Matthew. Not sure if I mentioned it, but I am a slow reader. Also today, your letter concerning fear arrived. The recipient gave a good answer. I like how he wrote the ADDS. The ads are that such a thing will never, the odds, sorry. I like how he wrote, the odds are that such a thing will never actually happen to you. You're a young female and the empire will likely crumble before you're old enough to be considered a threat. Well put. Back to the Bible. Should I assume you have the same edition as me? Just wondering if the page numbers I cite will correlate with yours. The interesting parts. Some of the footnotes are a bit confusing, especially where the difference between the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of heaven come into play. All right. So just to quickly break out from his letter, I have some brothers in the Lord that don't like the fact I sent him a Peter Ruckman Commentary Bible. They think I just should have sent him a King James Bible. It's interesting that when I read his letter, the very first thing that he mentions is something that I don't agree with. Peter Ruckman wrote an entire book called The Kingdom of God versus the Kingdom of Heaven. I don't agree with certain aspects of that book, or even the major themes of that book. So I hope that Jason doesn't get hung up on the footnotes and the commentary by Peter Ruckman. The main thing is to read the words of God and to use Peter Ruckman's commentary for what it is. It's a opinion of man. Now, do I have a lot of respect for Peter Ruckman? You bet I do. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the man. Do I agree with him on everything that he says or that he teaches? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I don't agree with any other human being that I've ever met in my whole life, including my own wife, 100%. So, I think we're all adults here, and I hope that he can, I'm going to make it clear when I write back to Jason Gerhard that I believe that the King James Bible, the words in the Bible, are the actual words of God, but that the commentary is to be taken for what it is, which is the opinion of a man. Okay? All right. He said some of the footnotes are a bit confusing, especially where the difference between the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of heaven come into play. Page 1242, where footnote 3 talks about the many aspects of salt. He should live in such a way to slow the decay of a rotting world. Not bad. Page 1258, footnote number 13. Listing the wet, warm places demons seek. He forgot Washington, D.C., exclamation point. It is a swamp after all. Page 1273, footnote 9. This discusses how the verse was the basis for selecting 12 jurors in our trial by jury. Reminded me how central the Bible was to our country's founding. Okay, it's interesting that all of the notes so far are about footnotes, which kind of leans toward my friend's argument that I should not have sent him a Peter Ruckman Commentary Bible. But I'm going to have to stress to Jason that he needs to focus on the words of the Bible and not the footnotes. Okay. I could spend a lot of time talking about these men in prison and the abuses they endure. but I'll just continue to read the letter. All right, Matthew 23:33. All this time I didn't know that Andrew Jackson's speech, wherein he called the bankers a den of vipers, and promised to rout them out, was biblical in nature. I thought it was just a good metaphor. At several points, Jesus calls them vipers actually. Page 1289 through 90, footnote 6. Latin expression for "this is my body" is hosis corpus. He writes in another language, I really can't read it. I'm going to say hosis corpus, from which comes the phrase "house POWs," referring to an act of black magic performed by a witch doctor. House POWs. Okay, I don't know the point he's trying to make there. It doesn't mean anything to me. He goes on to write, "Before taking on St. Mark, I have finished another book that was given to me. For me, it is a better read straight through the books of the Bible versus taking a little each day. Probably a week or so I'll be back. The New Testament is not as tough to read as the Old Testament was years ago when I tried. Thanks again and take care. Sincerely, Jason. P.S. Receive the second Schaefer Cox business card. The layout is well done. Why is he locked up?" All right. Well, you know what? I'm going to write him a letter on why Schaefer Cox is locked up. I did send him a Schaefer Cox business card. I'm going to answer the question about the kingdom of God and kingdom of heaven as best I can. And I'm also going to stress how thankful I am that he's taking time out of his days incarcerated to read the Bible. And if nothing else, if the interaction with Jason has resulted in him reading the book of Matthew, whereas he would not have done that before, then I consider that a very positive thing. And so as you write Jason letters, if you decide to write him letters, I pray that you will write him and engage him in discussion, encourage him to continue to read the Bible. It seems that he considers it a very confusing book, and he says that he's not he considers himself a slow reader, and maybe he likes to digest everything he reads. He seems to be a very thoughtful man, and he thinks about things very deeply, and so that's good, right? That's not a bad thing. All right, that's the letter from Jason Gerhard, and you know what? We just wake up in the morning, we keep going on, and we do the best that we can with the resources that we have. All right, God bless. Bye-bye.